let's jump to the Fair Credit Reporting Act definitions. Because remember what I said, there is actually two regulations that are coming to play on this one denial form. There was Reg B, which we just talked about, and then we have the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which is the regulation that governs the responsibilities of anybody who is pulling credit report. Now, just to make things crystal clear, if you look on the slide or if you look in the materials that you have, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, it is a consumer report, even if you're pulling that consumer report for purposes of commercial credit. Okay, so just because you are a commercial lender doesn't mean you can avoid FCRA. So that's a very important distinction. The other thing to keep in mind: when can you order a consumer report? Well, you can pull a credit report as long as you have any legitimate business purpose. But that can get a little fuzzy, right? Well, if somebody's requested credit, yes, that is a legitimate business purpose. If they're doing an annual report, I would say yes. If you've got a reason to go through and check their credit as part of an ongoing relationship, I think you're probably generally okay. You can argue that that's a legitimate business purpose. If you have loan renewals coming up and you're going to do that, that's perfectly fine. There might be other reasons that are out there. Just keep in mind, though, that in some cases, you may want to make sure that it's crystal clear that you're going to be pulling that credit report, especially if you're concerned that it might not be crystal clear. I have seen financial institutions that had litigation even, or they were sued because somebody alleged that they were pulling credit reports and they didn't have that legitimate business purpose. So there is no requirement that you have a signed authorization. You can justify your legitimate business purpose, but in some cases it might be a good idea to document the understanding that you're going to be pulling this, particularly if it's not associated with a new request for credit. There's definitions in your materials there that I'm not going to spend a whole lot on, but when can you pull a credit report on a commercial application? So for business applications, if you have an individual who is going to be personally liable, then that is a legitimate business purpose. However, keep in mind, if it is just the business that's applying and the individual behind the business isn't actually going to be primarily liable, then that wouldn't be a reason to pull their credit report, at least not on its face. Now, you may be able to agree that you're going to pull it just to check them out. You may have you may get written permission or something along those lines. You just don't have that independent right to pull it if they are not going to be primarily liable. Okay. I've mentioned before, there's nothing under the reg that says you have to have written permission before you can pull a credit report, unless you're pulling it for employment purposes. But it might be the best practice to make sure that you're documenting that they authorize you to pull it, particularly in these business situations, because somebody may argue that you were pulling it without proper authorization or without that legitimate business purpose. The other thing, and the reason we're bringing this up now, is because if you pull that credit report and you rely on information in the consumer report to take an adverse action or to deny that credit, but keep in mind, an adverse action is broader than just denying credit. Okay, it could be that maybe based on something in a consumer report at renewal time, you decide you want to reduce the amount of credit that's available, or you take some other adverse action, and you can see the definition is in the materials there. If that's the case, and you rely on information in that consumer report to take any adverse action, now you owe them certain disclosures. Okay. And the adverse action notice, whether, for whatever that adverse action is, whether it's closing an account or not providing new credit, you're going to give them specific information about the consumer report that you pulled. You're going to let them know the agency. You're going to give them certain information about the agency that you got the report from. There's going to be a statement in there letting them know that the agency didn't make the decision. They just provided the score or the report. And then there's going to be certain rights that that the notice will let them know, that they get a copy if they would like a free copy, if they have information in that consumer report that they want to contest, they have that right as well. So there's certain disclosures that go out there, and then there's specific scoring information. If your credit report produced a score, then there's specific disclosures that go along with that. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. If you want to take a look, it's actually on page 55. But a lot of times this is pretty hard coded into your system, and that information populates automatically. Just be aware that there's some very specific requirements for that disclosure if it goes out the door.